All right, folks, no doubt Clemson's season's been disappointing, and regardless of what happens Saturday, it's not going to change that. However, it can be a whole lot better knocking off that in-state rival, and especially putting a close on this season with a big, long winning streak to end it. We've got the Palmetto State battle, South Carolina, Clemson on the road for the Tigers. We got Jason Priester here, allclemsontigers.com. Jason, happy Thanksgiving, and how you doing?
Happy Thanksgiving to you, man. I'm doing pretty well.
All right. Well, you're going to have to let me know what this game means in state between these two. South Carolina was hoping for a better season. I think they're about 2 wins shy of where most people had them, being in that 7-5, 8-4 range. And obviously for Clemson, there are much bigger aspirations. So disappointing for both. But here we go. It's coming down to a bowl game for them. That's what they're playing for. And Clemson's just, trying to notch another win, but they've showed that they can play for pride.
Yeah, I think this is a big game for both teams. It's not just because of the rivalry, but just Clemson, the way they turned their season around and kind of won these three straight games. If you drop this one, it kind of feels all for naught, right? This is just the game fans want to win. I think it's one of those rivalries that's kind of undervalued. I think it's probably one of the more heated rivalries in the country. In-state rivalry, no pro sports teams in this state. So either you're Clemson or South Carolina, and it's a 365-day-a-year thing. Um, Again, it doesn't get the publicity of the Iron Bowl or some of Ohio State, Michigan, or some of those other big rivalries. But I don't think you'll find one that's any more heated than this one is. And I know the records aren't what people thought or were hoping for going in, but I don't think that takes anything away from this game. I think it's big for both teams. Again, I think Clemson needs a win. If you don't win this game and you're 7-5, I don't know how you even call the season a success at that point, even though you kind of turned it around the last 3 weeks. South Carolina's absolutely kind of underachieved, expectations of what was expected coming into the season. They kind of had those big wins over Tennessee, Clemson last year. The battle with Notre Dame in the bowl game kind of springboarded them into this year, and they started with a dud against North Carolina, and it's just not going well. But they've won 3 straight too. They've had a pretty good stretch here themselves, albeit against Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, and then a big win at home against Kentucky. So yeah, this is a big one, man. It's the big one. It's the biggest one in the state each and every year, and it'll be the one people talk about for the rest of it. For the next 365 days.
Now, for Clemson defensively, they're not going to face anything close to what they had to see this past Saturday with Omari and Hampton, because South Carolina has not been able to run the ball against anyone, like nothing. Like it's all riding on the right arm of Spencer Rattler. So big advantage for the defense when you can just kind of pin your ears back and come after the quarterback.
Yeah, South Carolina's. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say they're rushing for like less than 70 yards per game. They just don't run it well at all. They've just not had a lot of luck running the football. Their backs just, and then I don't want to pin it all on their backs. The offensive line's not very good, or it hasn't been very good for the most part. I think they've used 9 different starting combinations in 10 games, if I'm not mistaken. So it kind of starts up front with those guys, and it goes back to the season opener. They have 9 sacks against North Carolina. But yeah, it does. I think it makes it a little bit easier to kind of game plan for those guys, because they're not gonna. You don't expect them to be able to run the ball with that much success, and it makes it a little bit easier to kind of dictate what you want to do on defense, which is kind of slow Spencer Rattler down, because they're gonna go as he goes, and his biggest playmaker on offense this season has been Xavier Legette. Averages over 100 yards per game, receiving yards per game. I think he averages about 6 catches per game. So if you can kind of slow that passing game down, keep that running game in check, which most teams have been able to do, it definitely makes life a little bit easier for you. And this is probably going to be the second best defense that South Carolina's faced all year. I think it ranks right up there with Georgia's, and South Carolina's played both of them.
Our South Carolina guy, Chris Phillips, tells us that they went to the transfer portal for offensive linemen, and they all came in from really small schools, FCS schools, and just haven't panned out. I'm looking at 129th in the country in rushing yardage. And so then I thought, well, they figured out early that they can't run the ball, so they're throwing the ball constantly. So let's see what they're averaging per carry. Well, it's even worse per carry. So they are still trying to run it, but they're averaging 2.7 yards per carry. So they just can't move the ball on the ground. And man, that makes it tough on a quarterback. And against this defense, yeah, that's a tough way to go. They're going to have to figure some things out to get creative in the run game, I would think, because you have to run to some degree to have a chance to win this game.
Yeah, I would expect them to try and get creative. Wouldn't shock me to see some packages for backup quarterback Lenore Sellers, who's right here in South Carolina. I think they had some package for him on short yardage situations against Kentucky. I didn't see all of that game, but I was told they did. Um, and maybe some stuff with the screen short passes, to try to open some things up. But yeah, I think if Clemson's going to win this football game, they're going to have to lean heavily on that defense. And that's what they've done a lot of the year. That defense has yet to really let them down outside of the fourth quarter against Miami when they just kind of gave out after being on the field for pretty much the entire second half. But this is going to be, again, South Carolina's one of their top tests of the season when it comes to a defense. They played Georgia. Now they're playing Clemson. I think that's easily the two best defenses they have faced. And Clemson, unlike last year, their pass defense is pretty solid, man. They've been much better against the pass this year than they were last year. It's much improved. I think it's like 60 yards per game improvement or something like that off the top of my head. And you got Nate Wiggins, who is one of the top corners in the country. He's had tremendous success covering Keon Campbell of Florida State and now Tez Walker of North Carolina. And he's faced with another big challenge this week in trying to cover Xavier Legette of South Carolina. And I think that's when he's at his best when he's faced with these kind of matchups.
Got Jason Priester here breaking down Clemson and South Carolina going at it. I believe that's a 7:30 Eastern time game. Nothing speaks big game like the SEC network. That's what happens when you're 7-4 and you're not your typical Clemson self, I guess, is what that gets relegated to. But still, big one within the state, no doubt about that. Cade Klubnik's coming off 21 of 32 against North Carolina. How would you rate his performance?
I thought he played well against North Carolina. They started to take they at least and they took a few more shots down the field than they had been in recent weeks. Still mostly short to intermediate stuff, and Clemson's leaning heavily on that running game. Offensive line played well again, third game in a row. But he's kind of playing within the system, managing the game, and not trying to do too much. He's starting to grow up a little bit on the field. Still made a mistake right before halftime. And no timeouts, time running out. You got just enough time to run one play, and if you don't score, set up a field goal. Only thing you can't do is run it, right? Well, he takes off running just like he did against Tennessee in the Orange Bowl. Only difference is this time he gets it in, he scores, and nobody's talking about it. Still, kind of a mistake there, but that's really the only thing that I really saw that you could nitpick at. I thought he played well, but this is going to be the toughest road environment he's seen yet. He was asked Monday what the loudest crowd he's played in front of to date is, and he says Syracuse. And while it gets loud in that dome, this is going to be a whole different animal that he sees Saturday night. Close to 80,000 people. You don't have near that up there in that dome in Syracuse. This is just going to be on a whole different level. A lot of those guys on that Clemson team has experienced this type of atmosphere. They've experienced the atmosphere specifically at Williams-Brice, but he has not. So I think that's one of the storylines to watch as we head into this game, how he handles that environment, because he has not been at his best on the road. It is when he tends to make the most mistakes.